الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلوات الله والسلام عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن اتبع سنته إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. During the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he was challenged by the Quraysh, his tribe that he comes from, and by the Jews of Medina to produce a story that was similar to that which they had in the Old Testament. And when they challenged the Prophet ﷺ with this challenge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded with Surah Yusuf. And throughout Surah Yusuf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the story of Prophet Yusuf, Joseph, the story of his 11 other brothers, and the story of their father, Yaqub alayhi salam. Allah talks about the trials and tribulations that they went through, all of them collectively, because it wasn't just something that one of them went through individually. But toward the end of the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks directly to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. At the very end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that this story you did not know before. This is not a story that you experienced, but it's something that we have revealed to you. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because you weren't there during the plotting and the treachery at the time of Yusuf alayhi salam. As we know, the time of Yusuf was many, many generations prior to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that even no matter how hard you try, no matter how hard you desire, not everyone is going to believe. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly speaking to him, he says, وَمَا أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ وَلَوْ حَرَصْتُمْ وَمَا أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَوْ حَرَصْتُمْ بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ. That no matter how hard you try, that not all people are going to believe. And so this verse is talking not only about the story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam and his brothers, but more importantly about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the time that he was in. He had many detractors. He had many naysayers. He had people that were literally trying to kill him. We know the Prophet ﷺ was expatriated from Mecca and lived in exile, suffering from an embargo from the Quraysh for 3 years outside of Mecca. He went through this very difficult time. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this surah, He told the Prophet that not everyone is going to believe. And that shows us how the Prophet ﷺ felt about other people. That even though he had suffered persecution, even though he had been exiled and placed under an embargo, he still wanted goodness for those same people that persecuted him. He still wanted guidance for these people who theoretically were his enemies. This is how the Prophet ﷺ felt, and this is how he ﷺ loved all of mankind. Not just the Muslims, but all of mankind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا كَانَ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say, وَمَا كَانَ أَكْثَرَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, but it isn't that all of mankind, even if no matter how diligent you want, will be believers. And so this is what we have to focus on, brothers and sisters. How the Prophet ﷺ loved every single person in the community. How the Prophet ﷺ felt about other people that he dealt with. And we have to ask ourselves, is this how we feel? And is this how we treat other people in our community? Not just our immediate community, but the larger community at large. Again, these were not people who were Muslim, and these are people who he suffered, specifically him and the Muslims, persecution directly from their hands. The Prophet ﷺ loved and treated everyone in this way. And it was so much so that people who had just newly met him felt as if he was their best friend. And so again, we have to ask ourselves, is this how we engage and interact with everyone in society? But it wasn't just people. Even animals and creatures and the earth itself all felt the presence of the Prophet ﷺ. Every single one felt the mercy, were touched by the Prophet ﷺ, whether it be spiritually or physically. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in a very famous hadith, من سلك طريقا يلتمس فيه علما سهل الله طريقا إلى الجنة. That whoever treads a path trying to acquire knowledge, obviously this is knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowledge of his religion. Whoever treads a path trying to acquire knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make his pathway to Jannah. We know this. But later on in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that even everything in the heavens and on the earth will make dua for this person. Even the whales and the fish in the deep depths of the ocean. This is the effect of someone who was rahmatul lil alameen, who was a mercy to all of mankind. This was the effect of our Nabi, our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is how, the example that he left for us, this is how we should be and how we interact in society. And so when we're thinking, many of us just had Thanksgiving yesterday. When we're thinking about this event and how it affected the natives of this land and how we have commercialized it today, when we're talking, we're just using the catchphrase of Thanksgiving, what are we truly being thankful for? Is it the meal that is on our plates? Is it the fact that we haven't suffered the same persecution that the natives did just not too long ago? Is it the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided us to have this hidayah of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because each and every one of these things are blessings that require our things. But more specifically, the blessing of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, having his guidance, having his instruction, is a blessing that we should thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for each and every day of our lives. And it shouldn't just be something that is lip service. This shouldn't just be something that we're grateful for. We say alhamdulillah. Rather, this should be something that we put into action. This should be something that empowers our entire lives, that fuels our entire lives by the guidance of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because even the ants, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam advised us, so much so that even the ants, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned in hadith, that a prophet came before who sat under a tree and was bitten by an ant. And because of this, he asked for his belongings to be removed and for this ant hole to be destroyed. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told this righteous man that have you destroyed because of your own self? Have you destroyed an entire nation of people who obeyed and worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So we have to check ourselves. And is this the guidance that motivates and fuels our lives? That is it our own egos and our own selfish internal needs that motivates our desires and how we interact with other people? Or is it like the guidance of our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that makes us a rahmah for all of mankind? That makes us a means of mercy and guidance and love for all of humanity, for all of creation. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam. But that wasn't it. The Prophet ﷺ wasn't just a loving individual. He wasn't just a warm heart that felt goodness for everyone. Granted, he was that. But it wasn't specifically that alone. The Prophet ﷺ was someone who also didn't want anything in return. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the very next verse that you ask for no reward for this. It is a reminder for all people. The Prophet ﷺ wasn't altruistic, wasn't loving for the feeling that he got in return. Because we all know that our own love, when we love people and they love us back, it makes us feel good. When we're kind to others and they reciprocate that kindness, it makes us feel special. But the Prophet ﷺ loved for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake and his sake alone. The Prophet ﷺ was a good human being for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we're acting with other people, striving to be loving, does our love, or is rather our love, fueled by the service in trying to be a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is this how we look at how we even interact with each other? Perhaps people have harmed us. Do I interact with them even though they have harmed us, just like the Prophet ﷺ, out of spite? Do I interact with them, perhaps advising them, brother, sister, this is not from our deen, because I think that I know what's better? Or do I interact with them because I truly want them to be upon guidance? I truly want their behaviors to change so they can be a beacon of light like the Prophet ﷺ. How do we interact? How do we respond when we feel that we have been wronged? Because the Prophet ﷺ was wronged for 10 years. His own people were persecuted. They tried to make hijrah, and that hijrah was tried to stop. They were boycotted and placed on an embargo where they had to tie rocks to their stomachs because of how hungry they were. And he went to Ta'if, and the people pelted him. The children pelted him with stones. Not just the adults, the children belittling him in the utmost fashion. But still, the Prophet ﷺ, he wanted hidayah. He wanted goodness and guidance for all of mankind. So how are we interacting? Do we have this spirit of love, this spirit of service when we're interacting with other people? Because this wasn't something that we can just say, oh, that was the Prophet ﷺ. Those were that special time. Things have changed. That's not sufficient for us as an excuse. Because that was the same spirit that Umar radiallahu anh inherited. That was the same spirit that Sayyidina Nafisa, the famous scholar and saint, inherited. That was the spirit of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi that he inherited. That was the spirit of Malcolm X and Imam Waruddin Muhammad that they inherited. All of them had a very, very profound effect on their society individually or specifically, and the ummah at large. This is the same spirit that Imam Siraj Wahaj continues out the work with today. And we have to hope that this is the same spirit that we interact with. Not just when we're giving da'wah, not just when we're calling people to what we believe to be correct and to be the best, that which is going to save them in this life and the next. No. This same spirit has to be the spirit that when we're interacting with our families, when we're interacting with our friends, when we're dealing with our children, when we're dealing with our neighbors, when we're dealing with other people in society. This is the spirit of the Prophet ﷺ that we have to use to fuel our interactions and how we think in our day-to-day lives. Because it first has to start here. We have to change how we think about other people so that we can then change our actions. And once we change our actions, we hope that we can change our hearts and truly want good for everyone. But if we look at people just as an other, just as someone else, just another human being, very individualistic as we have come to be today, and not as a larger community, that my interactions, my behaviors, my thought patterns will affect not just that person, but will have a reciprocal effect and affect many other people, then we perhaps will be the means of destruction of the future to come. Not only are we going to hurt those people, but we perhaps will be hurt by that same spirit that we have given off. So again, we have to ask ourselves, is this the spirit that we have? Because the Prophet ﷺ loved us specifically today, 1400 and some 30 odd years later. He loved us so much so that it gave him gray hairs. The Prophet ﷺ on his blessed head had 17 gray hairs. And one day Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, his best friend and companion, he said, Ya Rasulullah, where is this gray hair coming from? Somewhat joking a little bit. But where are you getting these gray hairs? And in the story that Sheikh Yasser relayed to me just last week, the Prophet ﷺ responded, said, these gray hairs, they come from Surah Hud wa akhawataha. That Surah Hud and the similar surahs like it. But Ibn Abbas, when reflecting on this, and reflecting on giving the tafsir of the Quran, that this is talking specifically about where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet ﷺ, Istaqim kama umirt. Be upright as you've been commanded. And the fact that in these surahs, it talks about the nations that came before, and how because of their disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and their lack of fulfillment of that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded them with, then they suffer destruction. It was for the desire of the Prophet ﷺ, wanting for his ummah, for his nation to be better, that it gave him gray hairs. And it was so much so that that famous hadith that we always hear of Aisha radiallahu anha talking to the Prophet ﷺ, saying, why are you crying? Why are you up in prayer? So much like this. Why have you dedicated your life when all of your sins have been forgiven? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, أَفَلَا أَكُونَ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا. Should I not be a thankful servant? It was because of this verse. Being upright. Even though he knew all of his deeds were forgiven, he still wanted to be upright. So again, in the spirit of thanksgiving, are we trying to be like the Prophet ﷺ and truly trying to be thankful servants? وَأَقُولُ قَوْلِ هَذَا وَاسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهِ لِي وَلَكُمْ وَلِسَائِرِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ وَاسْتَغْفِرُوهُ وَأْتُوبُوا إِلَيْهِ. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ وَمَلَائِكَةَ يُصَلُّونَ عَلَى النَّبِيِّ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا صَلُّوا عَلَيْهِ وَسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the Quran that indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the angels send salutations upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. O you who believe, send an abundance of peace and salutation on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma salli wa sallam wa barik wa an'im ala sayyidina wa nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam ajma'in. This was the spirit of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The spirit of love and service for all of mankind. And even though he was loving and served all of mankind, and even though he knew he was a prophet of God, and even though he knew all of his sins were forgiven, again, all of this very different than my situation and your situation today, he still was someone who reflected and contemplated on the verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Istaqim kama umirt, that be upright as you've been commanded. And so we have to try to take this same spirit in our everyday lives. We have to strive, fighting against ourselves, struggling against our desires, the things that we perhaps are inclined to, our emotions and how we feel, and strive to be like the Prophet ﷺ, giving thanks to the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, and trying to be upright, just as we've been commanded. And this striving to be upright has to start first and foremost within ourselves, and how we look at ourselves. Wallahi, brothers and sisters, we are blessed. Not just blessed from a social economic perspective, but we're blessed on a spiritual level. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed and blessed each and every one of us to be Muslim. Allah has blessed us with the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ. He's given us a prophet through which who is a human being just like us, but was the best of creation, so that we can know how to live our lives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not only blessed us with that, He's blessed us with the surah like Surah Yusuf. So we can see how nations that came before us were persecuted and tried, prisoned unjustly, molested, sold into slavery, thrown into a well, abandoned by family, betrayed by family, struggled because of all these things. And still their disposition was forgiveness. Still their disposition was trying to achieve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure, uprightness. Yusuf alayhi salam said, Inna sijna uhabbu ilayya mimma tad'unani ilay. That prison is more beloved to me than that which you are calling me to. Vile actions, disbelief, not being grateful and being upright as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded him. Yusuf alayhi salam chose imprisonment, incarceration over that. This is the same spirit that we have to be. And we have to know that we are blessed because we have these examples in front of us. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us faculties. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us today to change our way. To take a step, to in the very least make the intentionality to do something different. To have the mindfulness to say, you know what, I haven't been doing as good as I could have been. Maybe I wronged someone. Maybe I have sinned. Maybe I have shortcomings. Maybe I could be a better husband. Maybe I could be a better wife, a better son, a better family member, a better community member, a better friend, a better child. No matter what, I have room to improve. And if I don't recognize that, then I need to recognize that the shortcoming is me and my own deficiencies. How can I become a better person? Because we have to change that which is in ourselves first and foremost. We have to start with ourselves. We have to change our lives from constantly looking out at other people. This one did that. This one wronged me. This one is shortcomings that, or this one could do better here. And we have to change it to, what did I do to impact this situation? How is it that I responded to that situation that perhaps had XYZ ramifications? What was my disposition when I encountered this? How am I looking at such and such person? If we don't start, wallahi, brothers and sisters, how are we going to be better? And then from there, we have to check ourselves in those circles closest to us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, in the very famous hadith, that I'm sure everyone knows, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا. Save yourselves and then your families from the fire. We're so busy at looking at other people. What is this one doing? What is that one doing? What are his shortcomings? What are her shortcomings? But what is it that I should be doing at home with my family? How should I be interacting? What are the morals and ethics that I'm exuding, thereby showing and teaching my family? Brothers, you have problems with your wives. How are you treating them? What are you teaching them? How are you showing them how to be good wives? Wives, you have problems with your husbands. What are you showing? How are you treating him? Children, we can enumerate until the end of time. We have to check ourselves. Wallahi, we have to make sure that we are trying to be like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because even though he was infallible, even though he was a prophet who was guaranteed a space in Jannah, he knew that he was the Habib sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was the beloved of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He stayed up in prayer all night long. What are we doing? How are we living our lives? What lives are we trying to live? How are we trying to change? And how do we want to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when the reality sets that we will die one day? We have to keep this reality in the very front of our minds, brothers and sisters. And then after, our families. How do we interact with community? Is it about me when I come to the masjid? Do I make sure I get my space in the front row? Do I make sure that I feel good when I come? Do I make sure that what I want to do is accomplished? I want to get some food in the cafe. I don't care who it is. I'm going to cut you in line. How do we interact when we come to the masjid? Or is it about, how can I serve my brother? How can I make the situation easier on my sister? How can I make it so that everyone in the community has a warm and loving experience? Because this was how the Prophet ﷺ was. Even for people who had something against him, who fought against him in wars, who placed him in embargo, he had a hirs, he had a zeal and a desire for all of them to be believers, for all of them to have the highest level of Jannah. The Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that to love for another brother, to want for all of mankind. In this hadith, in this narration, he specifically says for nas, for all of mankind. That which you love for yourself, then you will be a believer. But to be good to your neighbors, to have excellence with your neighbors, those people around for you, then you are a Muslim. Look at the difference, the differentiation that the Prophet ﷺ made in this hadith. When we love for our brothers and sisters to exceed, when we love for our brothers and sisters to have excellence in this life and the next, we want for them that which we want for ourselves, then in that situation, we are believers. But if we're merely excellent, we have ihsan with our neighbors, then we have struck the bare minimum of being a Muslim. So for us to excel in society, for us to excel spiritually, we have to make sure that we have a spirit of love and service for all of us and for all of mankind. I'm going to conclude with a story. I spoke to a mother from our community just yesterday, and she told me about her son. And this young man, who was only 20 years old, grew up in a very luxurious and comfortable environment. This young man, his mother told me, had his own suite with his own specific bathroom in their luxury apartment, right here in the Boston area. But when he heard that one of his friends, someone he cared about, who just so happens to be undocumented, who just so happens to be going through a difficult situation in their own life, struggling with homelessness, mental health situation, perhaps pregnant, this young man chose to inherit that young woman's homelessness to make the situation better. He booked a one-way ticket to uplift her, to remove her from the Boston area, to an area he has perhaps never been before, just to make her situation better, sacrificing everything and every comfort that he had right here in the Boston area. His luxury apartment, his family's finances, and right now, he is living homeless, sleeping in the lobbies of hotel rooms, with just the things that he has in his book bag, trying to take care of his friend because he knows she won't be able to do it by herself. This, wallahi, brothers and sisters, this is how the Prophet ﷺ was. This is the spirit that we have to have. We have to have a love and a care where we're willing to take the shirt off our own backs, to give up everything that we have to be like the Prophet ﷺ. Because if we don't, how will we see success in the future? How will we be a better community? And how will we address Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and answer his questions when we're asked about what we did and how we lived our lives? So brothers and sisters, we have to check ourselves. We have to check ourselves and see how we're living like the Prophet ﷺ. Because as Allah said in the Quran, he was a mercy to all of mankind. We have to ask ourselves, are we being merciful to ourselves? Do we have love for ourselves and trying to be better? Do we have mercy to our families, trying to balance everything that we have going on? Do we try to be merciful to our communities and the greater society abroad? We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to make us thankful for the things that we have, for this blessed hidayah, this blessed guidance that he's given us, and allow us to be people who truly appreciate all that we have. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us have a mindfulness, to have a reality that is centered around achieving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure. That means that we'll give up some things, some comfort in our own lives. We'll sacrifice for Allah's sake and trying to be like the Prophet ﷺ, perhaps so that other people will be comfortable. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us this prophetic diligence and this prophetic hirs like the Prophet ﷺ for everyone in society. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this our orientation, to make this our mindfulness, so that we strive to make everyone better, that we strive to uplift every single person that comes in our contact. And so that when people see us, they truly know we are embodying the spirit of the Prophet ﷺ as a mercy to all of mankind. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us a loving community, to make us people who love sincerely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even when we're faced with adversity, even when we're faced with wrongdoing. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove the difficulties that we have in our chests, the evil that we have deep in our hearts, to remove that and replace it with a love that only He subhanahu wa ta'ala can place in our hearts. Ya Allah, you know that we have shortcomings. You know that we have difficulties. You know that we've been wronged. Replace all of that with a love of you subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remove our difficulties, remove our insecurities, our hurt and our pain with the love of you, so that we can strive to be good believers, believers that are helping and embodying the spirit of the Prophet ﷺ. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us have a community of service that is trying to be aides and vicegerents and people, khulafa on this earth, people that are appearing the way of the Prophet ﷺ. Make us, Ya Allah, a community and a masjid that upholds this spirit, a spirit of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. We ask you, Ya Allah, by your infinite grace and mercy, have mercy and heal all of us who may be hurting. Those of us who may be hurting emotionally, those of us who are hurting financially, those who are hurting from a social level, those of us who are suffering and hurting from physical ailments. Ya Allah, heal us, heal all of us, heal our hearts, heal our minds, heal our wallets, remove every difficulty from us, Ya Allah, so that we can worship you better. Heal our children, heal our parents, give us the strength that only you could give us so that we can hard and move forward. Ya Allah, Ya Kareem, Ya Rahman Rahim, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam ajma'in.